that disappoints. Has anybody gotten anything from that? Amen. 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 Right. So we're going to conclude now by sharing with you how to recognize your boo. Amen. We talked about finding your boo, and we told you about things to stay away from. Now we want to talk about how to recognize your boo. Amen. Amen. When it comes to the dating game, a lot of us play it like the world. But yet we expect to have biblical outcome. We have the values of God that we're looking to realize. But how can you expect to receive the benefits and the blessings from God when you haven't taken time to be taught how to realize this singles journey God's way? And as a result of this, we find ourselves connecting with people who don't share our deepest values, our deepest desires, and we find ourselves getting caught up with people who can't connect with us in the deepest breakable parts of our soul. And so today, in this conclusion of finding your boo, I want to talk about recognizing your boo. Because one of the most important factors in many broken marriages, or else a significant contributor to broken marriages, is faulty mate selection. In other words, some people don't know how to identify boo material. Or else others see boo material as whoever's available. But today I want to talk about some principles that I believe will help guide us into making a better mate selection. And some principles that I believe will help us to assess whether or not the person that you are presently dating or the person you're thinking about dating is actually marriage material. Now remember what I said in the beginning now. There is a difference now. If y'all just friends, just kicking, just friends, there's no emotions involved, then you don't expect that to lead to marriage. But whenever you call yourself a couple as a Christian, then that should eventually lead to marriage. Now, assessing boo qualities is important from the respect that, again, it is the key to a successful marriage, okay? And nothing is more important that you will ever do in marriage or before marriage as selecting the right person. The right person is more important than how much you're willing to sacrifice. The right person is more important than how freely you're willing to love that person. The right person is more important than how well you're willing to provide or how well you're willing to nurture the emotional needs of another person. Because if you have the right person, you will probably have a fulfilling relationship. But can I tell you, if you have the wrong person, he or she will interpret your rightness in the wrong way. Dr. Neil Clark Warren said this about the significance of mate selection. He said, your choice of whom you marry is more crucial than anything else combined that you'll ever do to make your marriage succeed. He says, if you choose wisely, your life will be significantly easier and more satisfying. But if you make the grave mistake of choosing the wrong mate, then you will cause yourself and also your children immeasurable pain. Because he said most marriages that he's encountered were in trouble the day they said I do. Two people involved simply chose the wrong person to marry. And the question is, when do you make this critical and crucial decision? One author has said that there are stages that lead to marriage. Number one, there is the seeking stage. This is where you determine if God is doing something special in the relationship. And then secondly, you move then to become a serious couple. This is where you pursue the marital relationship, and you start seeing qualities that are developing, that are needed in the marriage in order to have a lasting love relationship. And he says, right now, before you exit the seeking stage, here are some qualities that will help you determine if that person is truly marriage material. So I want us today to look at some indicators that will help us to see if the person that you are dating, if the person you're thinking about dating is really marriage material. I want you to leave here today knowing whether or not that person that you have developed an emotional relationship with, if that is truly your boo. Okay? Because listen, there is a difference between a yellow light and a red light. Is that right? Yellow light means proceed with caution. Red light means stop. I wish I had somebody. And I want you to walk with me here, just in case you need an exit ramp. Okay? You can know today. Here's the first indicator that a person is not your boo. The person is absolutely not your boo if he or she is a pleaser. Now, I know that word pleaser sounds attractive. It sounds positive because it's natural for us to want folk who please us. But ultimately, pleasers don't please. Ultimately, what you're going to find is pleasers will become displeasurable over time. A pleaser is somebody who, in the relationship, wants to do everything they can to make you happy. And what a pleaser does is they will do anything necessary to make sure that that person feels better about his or herself. A pleaser is determined to respond to a person's wishes. And I know that somebody's sitting here listening to me right now and say, well, Pastor, listen, if you know anybody like that, introduce them to me. I sure can work with them, okay? I'll sign up for that. But watch this. A pleaser has very few goals in life, very few wishes, very few aspirations of their own. They are constantly always deferring to their partner. But there's a problem with that. The problem is pleasers are not authentic. They ain't real. Pleasers are often dishonest. I mean, pleasers will many times just tell you what they think you want to hear. And what happens is, after a period of time, you start to wonder if you even know that person that you've been with. Because what a pleaser does is a pleaser will change his or her mind so much that they will eventually reach the point that you're going to wonder, really, if you got a real connection that you thought you had. Because over time, what's going to happen is you will begin to resent a pleaser because they didn't tell you the truth when you asked him or her to be honest. Their response to you was what they thought you wanted to hear. I wish I had somebody here. And listen, now you ain't going to be right all the time. And if you're in a relationship with somebody that everything you say is right and they agree with it, something wrong. Okay? And over a period of time, you can become irritated because they're not being honest with you. They're not telling you the truth. They're just telling you what they think you want to hear. Is that right? And what happens is that when you're with a pleaser, you feel as if you have a sidekick and not a spouse. You're going to feel as if you got a cheerleader and not a true companion. Because when you got a true companion is going to tell you when you're wrong. A true companion is going to tell you when I disagree with you. Yeah? But a pleaser will ultimately, in the long run, not please you. But then secondly, a person is not your boo if he or she is a controller. And a controller is totally opposite from a pleaser, because a controller only wants to please themselves. And a controller rarely moves outside of their comfort zone. They use things like demands and threats and intimidation and criticism in order to maintain control over you. And then when that doesn't work, they will resort to suppressing emotions and short-circuiting communications. And they'll withhold affection because they have determined that it's got to be my way. And they feel like you got to conform to them. You got to conform to their goals, their desires, their wishes, or else they will withhold love from you. It's control. Because you know it's a controller, because a controller will constantly try from their standpoint to keep you away from people in your life who think for themselves. I wish I had somebody here. They don't want you to be around strong influences, because they understand that if you ever connect with somebody who can think for themselves, then they can no longer control you. And so what they do is they isolate you from anybody that is close to you, that is a thinker and who makes decisions, so that they can have more control over your life. Now, some of y'all have been in a relationship like that. You know, you don't have to raise your hand. But some of y'all have been in a relationship like that. You've been in a relationship where there are people who wanted to control you, and then because they wanted to have more control, they kept you from your family. They kept you from your friends. And they say, now, if you love me, now you're not going to connect with them. You're not going to be with them because you love me and you listen to what I say. It's either my way or the highway. And you know that they're a controller. Now, if they say things like, if you don't like it, you know what you can do? Anybody ever said that to you? You don't have to wave your hand. You know that that's a controller. If they're constantly telling you, now, this is what I want, and this is the way it's going to be, that's a controller. And when you're with a controller, it feels like you have discovered a third parent. It feels like you picked up a parent instead of a partner. And over time, a controller will become irritating to your soul. It'll rob the relationship of tenderness, because that person is not your partner. That person is a controller. So let me warn you to stay away from controllers. But here's another. A person ain't your boo if he or she is a withholder. A withholder is somebody who is constantly running from intimacy. A withholder is somebody who's constantly distancing themselves and struggling to have vulnerable moments with other people. I mean, it takes an act of Congress just to have a good conversation with them. And if you finally have a conversation with her, then it's because of your persistent aggressiveness. They struggle from a fear of rejection, even with folk they love. Now, this fear of vulnerability comes from either being abused or being abandoned at an early age. That's why I told you you need to take time to know them. You need to know what baggage they bring to the relationship. Because listen, I don't care who you are. If you've been scarred in your past, it's going to show up in your relationships. Do I have a witness? And sometimes when a person is a withholder, that means they've experienced some type of trauma in their lives. You never know what folk have been through. I wish I had somebody. I remember couples coming to me, husbands coming to me about their wives. The wives weren't affectionate. They weren't loving. And then when I got the chance to sit down and talk to some of the women in those relationships, found out that they've been molested and they've been raped and they've been abused and they've been scarred. And so they go into that relationship not dealing with those issues prior to, and they never shared openly with their spouse. And so now you're in that relationship and the spouse doesn't know what's going on. I wish I had somebody. Now, they don't mean no harm, but they just can't get close to you. You'll always feel like they're holding something back. And because of that, you just can't quite get to where you need in that relationship. It doesn't mean they're a bad person. It just means don't bestow upon them boo status yet. Okay? Because they got to first get over the issues that they've been dealing with. Okay? And now listen, when you're in a relationship with a withholder, you feel like you're the patient. You feel like, and sometimes you feel like you got to be Dr. Phil. Sometimes in those relationships, you feel like you got to brush up on your psychology just to make a personal connection. Like you got to go back and reread Sigmund Freud. I mean, just to build a relationship with that person. So let me tell you something now. You don't want to, I understand that people are human and they go through stuff. But if they don't deal properly with that stuff before marriage, that's a red light. Huh? You don't want to go in and then all of a sudden you got to be a codependent of somebody's issues that haven't been properly dealt with. But a person ain't your boo if he or she is a slacker. Slacker is somebody who's lazy. Slacker is somebody who doesn't like to work. But let me tell you something. Not only are there male slackers, you also got some female slackers. And when you're with a slacker, you feel like everything that is important and significant in the relationship is dependent upon you. Feel like you got to go to the store, buy the bacon, you got to take the bacon out of the car, you have to cook the bacon, you got to clean the dish that the bacon was in, and then when all the slackers get through eating, you got to wash the dishes. All I'm saying is that's just a scenario, but it means that everything in the relationship is dependent upon you. And when you with a slacker, it feels like you've adopted a child instead of finding a love. And if you're married to a slacker, you're going to feel more like a slave than a spouse because they're not doing their part to contribute to the relationship. So that person is absolutely not your boo if they are a slacker. Here's the next one. An exploder is not your boo. Now, this is not a person who struggles with just an occasional moodiness. But this is somebody who has a volcanic temper and an angry disposition. I mean, it is as if they're just hardwired mean. Have you ever seen somebody who is mean most of the time? Huh? I mean, in order to catch him not mean, you got to catch him on a rare day. Huh? I mean, how many of you been around folk? I mean, out of 365 days, it might have been 5 days you didn't see a mean look on their face. Or a bad attitude wasn't there.